Thank you, Omar, and thank you everyone for being here today. So we have an audience of young, new, budding entrepreneurs and a panel of very seasoned, experienced business leaders. So I hope this is going to be full of very useful insights for everybody. Young, I didn't say old, experienced, it's different. So I'd like to start by getting an idea of your thoughts on the current entrepreneurial ecosystem and kind of what it means to you. So Omar, I'll start with you. What are your thoughts on the actual power of entrepreneurship? What impact are you currently seeing it have in Egypt and the Middle East?
Well, welcome all, and really great to have you all here. Really excited and very excited to be on this panel with very distinguished guests and friends. I think if you think about entrepreneurship and the way that it's been moving over the last few years, I think it's extremely clear that it's having a much larger role in the Middle East. One of the surveys that was carried out recently and measuring over the last roughly 3 years, so since 2019 to 2022, shows that the rate or the number of responses, the percentage of respondents who want to get into their own business or start their own business rose from 2019 at about 16% to about 28% today. A doubling almost of the percentage of people in the Middle East who are saying, young people like yourselves in the Middle East, who are saying we want to enter into entrepreneurship. I think that's number one. Number two, the traditional role of either governments or larger private sector players and their ability to actually generate employment and ultimately economic impact is obviously with time becoming much more challenged. And I think the next round of where the energy is going to come from, where jobs are going to come from and economic development is going to come from is going to have to be from people like yourselves who are self-employed and who start up their own companies. We've seen this quite extensively, and I think one of the most exciting things that I've seen in the Middle East over the last roughly 15 years or so has been some of the key successes, some of the famous unicorns and whatnot that have come out of the region here. And that is extremely exciting because companies like this tend to spawn a whole bunch of other players beyond. And we know also from pure, facts and statistics and measurements that restarters or people who come out of entrepreneurial companies and back into entrepreneurship, so serial entrepreneurs, tend to be a lot more successful and tend to generate, again, more jobs, more economic impact for the region. And I think that's something that's extremely exciting that we're seeing in the region here.
Yeah, so it's definitely a growing ecosystem. Looking at it from a bit of a different perspective, Mohamed, so it's hard to believe, but I think you've been with PepsiCo over 28 years, is that correct? My goodness. Yes. So thinking back...
Under 30. Under 30.
So thinking back to when you were young and new and starting out, not to labour the point, what was your experience as a young professional then, and how do you think the challenges that you faced then compare to what new starters are facing today?
First of all, great to be here with a room full of entrepreneurs and a panel with friends. I graduated in 1990, and at the time, multinationals was a big thing. And everybody at university said, I want to join a multinational. And it was a fashion. It wasn't a passion. Everybody was going there. So entrepreneurs, I hear a lot, I want to go start my own business. It needs to be a passion. Fashion, they phase out very, very fast. Passion is what drives hard work, drives patience, and ends in success. So just take that in mind, because when I started, I look at my career in a couple of phases. The first phase was the development phase. And I started to find out what my true passion was. I was fortunate to work in an advertising agency, and I had a lot of clients from banks to cars to tech to fast-moving consumer goods. And I came out with that experience saying, you know what, this is what I want. And I came out with 3 companies that I wanted to join. 3 companies, very short list. The culture of the company defined what I wanted to do. I wanted to be an entrepreneur. I wanted a company that injects these values. And I started applying. I applied to PepsiCo. Just for you, I applied a couple of times. I was rejected a couple of times. But at the end, I went in. The first thing I wanted to do when I entered PepsiCo was to get promoted and reach the top level. And I was quickly introduced to mentors. And then one mentor gave me a piece of advice that I always hold to this day. He told me, career is a marathon, not a sprint. Build a strong foundation, work on yourself, and at the end of the race, you will land on top. And I always, always carry this with me. So for those entrepreneurs, I want to tell you something. Every single company started as an entrepreneur. Pepsi started as an entrepreneur. This pharmacist that wanted to give something to his customer. IBM, Apple, every company started as an entrepreneur, but they were addressing a certain consumer need. Very sharp laser. And those companies or startups that lose this consumer centricity, they're out of business. We've seen Kodak, we've seen Toys R Us, we've seen a lot of companies that just lost sight and they were out of the market. So challenges, there will be challenges. Know that it is a marathon, stay with it, stay very sharp on what you want to do, understand your consumers, and be patient. That will be my advice.
Excellent, thank you. So marathon, not a sprint, and passion, not fashion. Those are some good sound bites. Thank you very much. Moving on to you, Yasser, and taking a new perspective again, coming as you do from a company that's just been constantly disrupted by new technology. What are your thoughts on how the innovations being created by young people today are impacting big business? So we're talking about empowering them, but actually how do they empower you?
Yes. So again, thank you for having me. I'm very happy to be here. Again, among very close friends and a lot of faces that I know. I'm happy to know. They give us energy. And I agree, I think one part of entrepreneurship that is very important is to wake up when you see this view of a sea. It helps for sure clearing out your mind. But I think when we talk about disruption, at least the first thing that comes to mind, what is it really? And I think disruption is something when you deliver something that is cheaper, that is faster, and that is even in a more customer experienced way that helps the customer deliver whatever he wants to do. So it's a good thing. And I think the worst thing that you could do, and this is why companies lose, is to fight it. So I think we learned in a very mature way, in a very important way, not to fight disruption. In fact, we disrupt by ourselves. We're a core element of disruption. We want to disrupt. We are, in fact, helping, and I think this is very important in this region of the world, to create something what I believe is the perfect storm. Because today, if you take a look at the market, we have in the Middle East and Africa a lot of people investing nowadays in 4G, in broadband, so it avails a certain technology. You have handsets, devices, so even everything is being recorded instead of watching it by your own eyes. And then you have, of course, everything that is around funds. Money is cheaper than it used to be, at least in the last period of time. I don't think it will continue to be like this, but it helps. So there is an excess of money. Marketplace. We're a very big market. Egypt, one regulation, it helps. Even Europe is having difficulties because it's very fragmented. Egypt and the Middle East, we have big countries, so it helps create a bigger market, which helps also entrepreneurship. Youth, and I think we have a lot of better educated and stronger educated with a stronger will than in the 90s, with all my respect to everybody here. They are better, they want to do better, they are more enthusiastic, and the environment is helping them, them to do so. And I think even the last element that came as that created really everything is, despite of everything negative, is COVID. So it helped even more create this, let's say, perfect storm of entrepreneurship, of digitalization that is taking place. We are helping them. So I see here maybe PayMob. I'm seeing We're working a lot with Fawri. And it's sometimes a competition, and sometimes we work together. So we learned also that you cannot work with the company all the time or only compete with them. There are certain parts where we'll compete, certain parts where we will work together, and it's not one way or the other. So today, for example, if I take a look at Fawri, back in 2008 when Ashraf came to me and told me, told even my IT guy at that time, the lady it was, we want to connect, we said, but then we said, why not, let's try. So in 2008, we connected to them. We had all the recharges. So for everybody know, it was scratch cards. Each one has to buy a scratch card. Today, more than, it used to be even more, but today Fawri represents 40% of my daily revenue that runs through them. So I mean, it's a great development. You need to embrace it. It doesn't mean that they are not a competitor for us in certain fields now. They have their wallet, I have my wallet, so we're competing. But I'm still relying on them on this. So I think we're in a great environment. We should be very happy to be in this time, in this period, in specific in this region. And I think entrepreneurship is growing and will continue to grow with this ecosystem that exists nowadays.
So all about kind of smart collaboration, I guess. So let's find out a little bit more about the initiatives that each of your huge companies are doing. Omar, coming back to you. So firstly, what do you think are the key elements to creating a successful entrepreneur and a successful business? And what are you doing at Orascom to support this?
So I think I'll broaden it a little bit more actually to the private sector, not just for Orascom Development Holding, but beyond. So I think one of the key things that the private sector has got to play, I think, as a role, is how do we help change the skill set that individuals have in order to face the workplace. A lot of the challenges that we have in the Middle East, in the Arab world today, and that is also clearly reflected by what the youth are telling us coming out of universities, is that the type of skills that they graduate with, their opportunities to go and do internships or training on the job, etc., along their education path, as well as actually what they take away from their school and the way that they do their studying, is actually significantly far behind what it needs to be a successful entrepreneur, or even frankly a successful contributor economically to the local economy in which you work. So number one, I think, initiative is what can we do from a sort of academic entrepreneurial training perspective. So all the academic programs that are put in place for entrepreneurship. How do you learn that in school while you're graduating? And the role of the private sector here is through partnerships and NGOs, like for example Injaz Al Arab. Injaz is an organization I've been sitting on the board of for the last 15 years in the region. We've run, we today touch over 750,000 students annually that go through our training programs, and these training programs are complementary to what you normally learn at school, at university, etc. So that's one important role. There's also an important role for the private sector to launch schools that are very different in the way they do things. In Guna here, we're very proud to launch a new school called Manara. And Manara is going to be actually a boarding school. So a school where you send your kids for the last 5 years of their education and where they basically live on campus, what we call a holistic residential program, in order to develop the future leaders of this country and of the region, hopefully, that get exceptional access to exceptional academic training, right? And all of which is financial needs transparent, meaning if you cannot afford it, there will be support for that. If you can afford partially, there will be support for that, etc. So that's the second type of support that you can get from the private sector in the countries in which you operate. I think the second thing I would say is encouraging fast failure inside organizations, and for that to be completely accepted. In large companies like ours, it is always very difficult for people to come in and to say, look, that didn't really work out. And everybody will have the natural tendency to find ways to describe something as successful, even though in reality we all kind of know and feel, etc., that it's not. So the more we encourage within the private sector this concept of it's okay to fail, It's okay to fail fast so that we can learn from it and regenerate again. Back to this concept of restarters, people who relaunch companies. Serial entrepreneurship is a very critical skill set that I think is very important. Third, ultimately, I think we have a big thing around entrepreneurship training. We don't do much in terms of internships or opportunities to collaborate directly with current or future entrepreneurs, or even SMEs, frankly, as large companies. It's very difficult for an entrepreneur. I don't even think that any of you guys, if you wanted to do some kind of a program with Orascom Development or with PepsiCo or Orange, I don't know that, at least for Orascom Development, you have someone to call, a website to go to, or through a contact to talk to in a structured way where you can get opportunities for internships or collaboration or programs together. And finally, I think we have to create those spaces where entrepreneurship and creativity and collaboration, cross-collaboration are created. And that's why we're super excited by what Mohamed Aimer spoke about a few minutes ago. Something like G Valley is both a physical as well as an ecosystem type of an environment, end-to-end, from education to funding to all the legal and administrative stuff, to also just the nice place to live and work, I think is an important element for the private sector to contribute.
There's a lot of really interesting stuff there. I like the idea of helping businesses. Like, failure is not a bad thing, right? It teaches you and you grow from it. Mohamed, you were speaking earlier about some of the challenges you faced at the beginning, but how mentorship and advice really helped you. How are you now working with PepsiCo to help new emerging leaders and young entrepreneurs to create successful businesses?
First, we need to realize that they're different, okay? So I was raised by baby boomers. Baby boomers work very hard and they instill. So as a Generation X, I came going to work, working hard. But things change in terms of income. So millennials and Gen Zs were brought up differently. Not bad, but differently. And they're great because they can voice opinion fearlessly. They want things in the workplace that we never thought of. They want to be owners. They want to act as owners. They want to take fast decisions. They want to be allowed to make mistakes. They don't want to punch in and punch out. They want flexible working hours. And you as an organization needs to acknowledge this and change, because that's what you want to attract. We want to attract millennials. We want to attract Gen Zs that is going to take the company to the next generation. Okay, these are the guys that are coming in with the ideas and say, you know what, email doesn't work for me. I want this. I want to be talked to this way. I want to work that way. I want you to digitize the whole company so I can work from home and be as productive. We want more diversity. When I come to Pepsi, I'm not coming to work only. I want to be involved in CSR. Okay? I want to be part of that. And I want a real job. Don't give me a job. I want to address real problems that are going to take this company from here to there. So a lot of changes we've started to do as an organization to attract talent. And people coming in Pepsi today is, yes, you have your job, but also there's a lot of things you can volunteer. So CSR, we want you to come in. We want you to teach entrepreneurs what you've learned. And we have a lot of platforms where they do that. I want you to take tough calls. So you know what? We have something called the Blue Chips. Every year there is 4 or 5 projects that's going to turn this company around. And you volunteer. You go in, and it's young generation that come with solution, and they're not hobby projects. These are transformational projects for the company. So this way, we're building this entrepreneurial spirit into the company, and I think that is extremely important. I want you to act as owners. I want you to voice your opinion fearlessly. I want you really to come with ideas that you execute fast, and as Omar said, if we fail, we fail. But if we don't act fast, this is a bigger failure for me. I want you to act fast, make a call, and then we see the consequences. So we are changing to be the PepsiCo for the next generation and generation after. And we're doing it by injecting entrepreneurial spirit and ways of working into the company.
I was raised by baby boomers too, so I can also see the changes in the workplace. Yasser, so you spoke earlier about collaboration. So can you tell me a bit more about how Orange is working closely with entrepreneurs and the startups that you mentioned to create a more collaborative ecosystem?
Yes. So I think in Orange we have a bit of a more difficult role, because I think we're inside technology. So we have a role not just only to let's say work as Mohamed and Omar explained very well on our internal structure, so to help our own employees, but we have also to let's say empower the ecosystem. So in fact, to do so, we created an ODC, which is an Orange Digital Center that was just created this year, and we're creating another one in Aswan early next year, and maybe we should create one in Gona, and I don't know, well, maybe we'll see. But this ODC is in fact, it's like a pre-seed. So in fact, it's an area where we help, let's say, startups to create their business plans, to offer them, let's say, and expose them to certain funds that they can come and help them also, and let's say invest in them as a seed. And we do for them a lot of, let's say, support. So we have a Fab Lab, we have a coding school. So it's a very big center that we're very proud of. We have not only in Egypt, the center, we have it at least 9 as we speak in Africa. I was just visiting yesterday one in Jordan. So it's something where we also give our entrepreneurs an opportunity to share knowledge within the zone, which is, I think, is very important. So as a first step, we have this ODC, but we have also the second step, which is the Orange Venture, which is in fact a fund of 300 million euro. That we just located here in Egypt with a fund for Africa in specific of 50 million. So it was just moved, I think, 3-4 months ago. We invest directly in even things that are not related directly to us. So maybe not a lot of people know about this, but for example, we invest in Trella, nothing to do with Orange. We invest in Amanlik, we invest in Hakima. We help in certain companies through these ventures even to expand outside Egypt. Or the other way around. We have a demo day. I'm inviting you for this demo day on the 12th of December, where we also expose these companies to either external, or we get other companies from, so we have 12 international ones coming, it's 12 December, 12 companies coming in on this event to showcase for funds here in Egypt. So I think it's a very strong ecosystem that we're trying to work on. We're continuing to build on that. And then, of course, we don't only work on that, but we also work with Injaz. I think it's my son, in fact, is a big fan of them. I personally, or we as Orange, work with Enactus. I'm the chairman of Enactus. We're very proud. We won for 4 times the global award, or the global championship of Enactus, competing against Canada, USA, Japan, other African countries. So, and where we help undergraduate, in fact, work on their entrepreneurship. So I think we're working on all the elements. We are in this area where data is there. Maybe it's more difficult to know if I drink my Aquafina as we drink, but in telco, in digital, we have a lot of data. I know where my customers are, what they're drinking, what they're doing. So I think we have this privilege, and we're trying to pass this privilege more and more to our partners and entrepreneurships.
So staying with you, actually, and staying on that point of collaboration. I'm sticking with you, sorry.
Okay. I thought we were going, I'm very...
I know, I'm breaking the mold. I'm going to go the other way now. Just for our final questions, because, I mean, you've spoken a lot about collaboration. It's obviously something incredibly important to you. So if there was more collaboration across the ecosystem and more support systems just generally in place for new starters and entrepreneurs, what impact do you think that will have on the opportunities that are available for them?
I think it's a good question, because I don't think there is any limits. Seriously, I think it's specifically in our area and in Egypt and the Middle East in general, we have this opportunity that we're able to really bypass a lot of issues and problems we have today. It's a big market, as we said. We will create new jobs. So today we have a lot of jobs about data, about AI, about information security that weren't even there before. My highest paid teams are information security teams, by far. It's the most difficult teams to recruit. Then, of course, so I think we'll create more jobs. This is for sure. We'll help the government, because I think it's very important that we understand until today, 75 of the startups are around fintech, retail, logistics, which I think is good but dangerous. There are other areas like health, like agriculture, like everything that is around, let's say, digitalization of the government services, that I think we have a lot of opportunities to do, and could help not only Egypt but all African countries. If we have this ecosystem that you implement something and then you get all the, let's say, government services working, I think it will help everybody. It will help all African countries and everybody around the globe. And again, what we need is, in fact, is easier regulations. I think startups need some help, but less regulation. And I think we sometimes mix both. Help does not mean that you control 100%. Help means support. So I think we need to ensure that this thin line between help and control is clearly identified.
That's a very good point. And moving on to you, Omar, we've now brought up the subject of kind of regulation and the external factors that impact entrepreneurs. What are some of the changes that you think are needed to the current ecosystem to give young people the best chance of success when building new businesses?
I think there are multiple players in the ecosystem ultimately, and we spoke earlier a little bit briefly about the role of the private sector. I think on the government or public sector side, I think there's possibly 3 or 4 themes that ought to be taken into account. I think the first one, along the lines of what Yasser was talking about, is overall the significant simplification of the regulations associated with SMEs and startups. And I think there's multiple layers to this. I think the first one is transaction costs for startups and SMEs today in the entire region still remain extremely high, because all of these transaction costs are typically associated with large companies or other government entities, and they haven't been tailor-made back to startups and SMEs. I think that's an important element. I think the second important element associated with this is introduction or acceleration, because everybody says we have e-government services and whatnot, but really from a usability and can I really do my transactions, my most painful transactions day to day completely virtually without having to go physically interact with anybody or have to deal with multiple touch points in the government. I think that has got to be significantly accelerated. And I think the third thing that has to be put in place is bankruptcy laws. We don't have for most of the region, and when I was previous to Orascom with McKinsey for the last 20 years, we worked a lot with governments in the region, particularly in the Gulf, countries like the UAE, Saudi, etc., trying to actually help them fix the bankruptcy laws so that, again, encourage this concept of restarters or serial entrepreneurs. It's perfectly okay to go bankrupt taking the risk that you're taking. Do it fast, do it efficiently, no stigma associated with it, but then do it in an honest and in a very transparent manner. And then from a regulation perspective, make that simple for the entrepreneurs to fail and quickly start again. So I think that's one theme, is government regulations. I think the second theme is access to finance. And it's not the same, if I'm trying to finance a project as an SME, I think startups today in the region, we have a lot more funding available. Again, in my old life, we helped set up a whole bunch of funds. We set up a $500 million fund in Saudi Arabia for startups with STC. We set up one in Abu Dhabi, quite equivalent with Hub 71. And that's, I think, starting to churn and work quite effectively. So it's not so much money for VCs and startups, especially the ones in all these hot areas like fintech and others, but actually it's primarily for the SMEs. So once you've done your first or second round of financing in those hot areas, how do you actually continue and have access to project finance on a much more regular basis? I think that's an important element. We talked about the introduction of entrepreneurial curricula in public education. And I encourage governments in this case to partner with the likes of INJAZ and the many other organizations that are supporting in this. An interesting little factoid where I sit on INJAZ, when we look at a country like Morocco, where the local team in INJAZ in Morocco has managed to work very closely with the Ministry of Education to embed the curriculum of INJAZ inside the regular curriculum, the uptake rates and the number of students that are going through the program there is disproportionately higher than a very large country like Egypt, as an example, where that relationship isn't there, where that embedding of those programs in the normal public schools is not in place. So I think that's a third big anchor. And finally, and really an important one, is the public sector does have an important element in encouraging this whole inclusion much more, particularly of women. I think we've very clearly seen that women's cultural barriers to entry into entrepreneurship or into startups is very different from the male kind of issues associated with this. And I think the more we can have education for women, we all know, both intuitively and empirically, that having more women, more diversity in the workplace significantly enhances the outcomes for everybody associated. And I think that's a really critical part that, again, we have a long way to go in the region on.
Fantastic, thank you. So Mohamed, just some final thoughts. It's the last question that I'm going to ask anyway, and then we'll put it to the audience. But what are your final bits of advice to the young people that we have here today who are looking to kind of increase their skills, attract investment, and yes, etc.?
I think let me start by education, because I think the education system in Egypt doesn't graduate entrepreneurs. It graduates a stereotype of people that know information, and they come to multinational companies and we start building that. So I think education plays a big role, and I want to see more in the syllabus to drive that, because if you're educated, it's you're going to manage your business better. You're going to understand, because let's be honest, the coming year in Egypt is a tough year. Economy is stretched. Big companies are struggling. So startups, if you don't know your business, if you don't know your P&L, if you don't drive productivity, you're going to suffer. And I see big manufacturing and big plants closing down because of the economy. So education is going to help. Now, if you don't have that, ask questions. It's very important that you get advice how you can survive the next couple of years. There's a recession going to happen, but it is not the end of the world. We're going to recover. So those who are going to be extremely nimble and understand how to get their business out there, the likelihood of success is going to be huge, because this is a big wave, a big storm that's coming, and it's going to test you. It's going to test how your business model is. So please reach out, please ask questions to understand how to navigate this. We as big companies, we're meeting day in, day out, how to navigate this and how to go out on top. So I can imagine startups are going to be struggling on that. So I'm offering that you can reach out to me, to PepsiCo, and we'll be more than willing to help, because that is the role of the private sector, to give advice.
Thank you so much. I think Mohamed kind of did the next job for me. You can reach out for questions now, but we only have time, I think, for maybe 2. So does anyone have anything they'd like to ask a member of the panel? There's a gentleman right up the top there. Could I ask someone to run this mic up? Thank you.
Where do we have the question?
Sorry, it's actually the other side, Omar. This guy in the blue T-shirt, third row down.
Blue T-shirt. Blue T-shirt. Raise your
There
hand.
we go. We're making Omar get his steps in today, definitely.
Sorry, if you can introduce us to yourself, your name, and what you do.
Hi, Hi, Michael Gord. I'm the founder of an ecosystem focused across the blockchain capital market. I wonder how you guys are applying disruptive technologies or how and if you guys are applying disruptive technologies like the blockchain and the metaverse into your businesses.
Thank you for.
Thanks for the question. So, short answer to your question, I think large companies like ours do take a bit of time to wind up and to start catching on to this. The only little factoid I would tell you is actually we now sell real estate with crypto. So we've sold a bunch of our real estate in places like Montenegro with, in this particular case, Bitcoin. So that's as far as we're actually touching on some of these disruptive, and I know it's a tiny fraction of blockchain and much more distributed kind of ledger and tracking, etc. opportunities. We're still at the very early days, and I would say that I think the more interactions we get from somebody's laughing, and you're right to laugh about that. The more we interact with people like yourselves who do have a much more laser-focused approach to either prop tech in this case or hospitality services or applications, and the more you approach us back to this whole question of how do entrepreneurs and SMEs work with larger companies and bring that innovation, I think that is much easier for us and than for us to try to grow these things internally, despite all the initiatives that we're taking, which I think for very large ships like ours are frankly and very transparently much more difficult to make happen.
Just to add on what Omar said, I think it is not the technology, but it's getting people to use it and master it. So I'll give you an example. The latest mobile phone, I buy it, I only use 2-3 features, but I use them well. We're a big organization, we're 14,000 people, mostly frontline, 70%. Now, a couple of years ago, we were manual, so the sales guy would go out and he doesn't know what he sold, where he sold it. Today, with basic technology, this is a huge transformation. So when I look at technology, I look at my people and say, how can I make them use it and benefit to the max? And I think where we are going to be developing, we are going to get there, but mobilizing 14,000 people, you need to take it in phases, but definitely this is what it's all about. It is about digitization your business and getting the maximum productivity from that digitization.
Did you want to add quickly?
Can you give us your name, sir?
My name is Tariq. I'm the CEO of Dentsu. One of you spoke about the role of education.
Right.
I want to ask you, do you see an opportunity for the private sector to work with the education institutions on specific skills that are not missing, but that are rare in the Arab world when it comes to capabilities in the job market? So skills like data engineering, like analytics, that we find very hard to find in this market. And a lot of companies go to Eastern Europe, India. I think Egypt has a brilliant opportunity, and probably the government, like any government, cannot do it on its own. But there's a window of time where global hubs will be established, and Egypt has a golden opportunity to do that. That's just missing some layer of talent skills.
Thank you. This is going to.
So maybe I think Shelbaya talked about education, but I think in general we do this a lot. So I think we're undermining a bit the capabilities of Egypt when it comes to this regard, because I see we have a big hub. For example, in Orange, our biggest hub that serves the region is in Egypt. So I think we have a good education system. Maybe it's not really preparing the students to the corporate life or to the work or to, let's say, being an entrepreneur. But they get a lot of core, let's say, data and core education. So I think we're working a lot. Today we work a lot because with the French University, we work a lot with Ain Shams University, we work with Cairo University, with the GUC we have major programs, and with the UC. So we work with, let's say, local universities on these areas. We work with them on projects. We undergraduate in specific areas, and then we hire most of the time. For example, of DUC, I think we take more of the half of graduates of certain areas directly to work into our workplace. And again, we're privileged because we have a lot of AI, we have a lot of cloud solutions. Where we have the biggest cloud in Egypt. Again, we're doing it for the government, worth $135 million, just one data center. So I think we have a lot of this which drives and which, let's say, interests people to come and work with us because they see new technologies. And I guess engineers are driven by technology more than use cases, which is dangerous, but it is the case.
Okay, and we're going to have to end it there, guys. We've run out of time, but thank you so much, you guys. You've been absolutely incredible. One more time, round of applause for our panelists, please. Thank you.